everyone, my name is Julie. I am the game entertainment specialist at Wahl+Case, and today we are receiving William. Very nice to meet you, William. Can you introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. My name is William Nelson. I am a general manager for Kinotrope, the Kinotrope Gaming Esports division. Currently, I've been in Japan for 8 years now. I first came to Japan in 2015 just for a quick study abroad. And then after that, I came back for graduate school. And I've been in the esports world for about 5 years now. I'm very glad to be on the podcast today, and I'm very happy to talk about esports with you
Thank you
today.
so much for coming. So, William, can you give us actually the current landscape of esports globally and also in Japan?
Certainly. It's a bit of a big topic, so it's kind of, I'll try to give you the short version of what's going on here. Esports in general is the kind of professionalization of gaming. So if you're looking at more competitive games, you're maybe like Counter-Strike or Valorant or any kind of FPS games. There's also the MOBA games, which are like League of Legends and Dota 2, that are very popular, and it kind of pits teams against each other, where they are competing for either a prize, either it can be money, and in Japan that can also be products. Into that a little bit later, yeah, esports is definitely an interesting topic, and I really am glad that we can talk about it. One of the biggest things that creates esports is the community. And basically, when you have a game that people really love and they're really passionate about, they will begin to create their own tournaments. And I believe that is where the true heart of esports is. Yes.
Why do you think it has taken so long for esports to take traction in Japan, actually?
It's more or less of my opinion, but actually the actual fact. When I was in graduate school in Japan, I studied the Japanese esports environment. The reason is plain and simple: prize money. It's just there wasn't enough money. When I was studying it in grad school, I had found out that in Japan, there's actually a law against how much a video game can pay out for a tournament. This stems actually from old gambling laws. The old video poker, if you're familiar with it, maybe not a lot of people are, but it stimulated that if a game is advertising a product, then it could not give a payout greater than about 100,000 Japanese yen was the limit, which, depending.
$800 or so.
Yeah, depending on which exchange rate you're using. But just about 100,000 yen was the hard limit for a lot of payouts. And in 2017, there's this Japan Esports Union. They tried to circumvent this law with what is known as the esports license. And what it was is the Japanese Esports Union collaborated with the top gaming companies in Japan, which was, Capcom, Sega, all those. And they created this license to give to high-performing players so that they would have uncapped earning potential for tournament prizes. Unfortunately, that system failed. And that I did a whole dissertation on that, on why it failed. Cut it short, the biggest reason was that the Japan Esports Union did not work directly with the players. They did a kind of top-down approach. So they didn't get any feedback on if they wanted the system to work. They just created it and then just put it on the players without thinking too much about it. There was some really big friction. If you're familiar with any of the fighting scene, you may be familiar with some of the top Street Fighter competitors that they were in, like Evo Japan, one of the biggest fighting competitions in the country. And one of the top fighters won, and there was a promised prize pool, and it got cut down to about $800 US, which is barely enough to pay rent for a month or so. So it's been a hot topic for a couple of years, and because of that lack of prize pool, people have not seen esports in Japan as a full career. That is, until a couple of years ago, we had the COVID boom. We had the whole gaming industry see a skyrocket in sales, performance. We had the whole streaming industry see a skyrocket in viewership because people were just home, they were playing games, and it was one of the top mediums for people to, spend their leisure time. And with that, we saw the growth of esports in Japan as well. This caused pressure, this caused more movements, and then we get into the fact that some of the laws have been changing recently. There's been a big push with the legal system in Japan, not necessarily with the Japan Esports Union directly, but there are some lawyers who are working with the Japan Esports Union to kind of change the law. And we've seen some changes recently, and you can see that with esports tournaments in Japan having really large prize pools nowadays and getting around that kind of limit. There was also some kind of gray areas where I mentioned that the law was if a product was being promoted, then it couldn't have the prize pool associated with it. But then there was the argument that if it's a free-to-play game, then it wasn't selling a product because the product is free. So then that's how you saw League of Legends, you saw Apex Legends, you saw those free-to-play games see the earliest growth in Japan because they kind of utilized that loophole to get around that. And that's why those games were kind of the earliest popular esports in Japan, aside from the fighting games, of course. But yeah, that's generally the limiting factor for Japan esports when you compare it to the neighboring countries like South Korea and China, where you saw major esports growth in the region, and Japan was just lagging behind. Japan as the video game center, right? You've got Nintendo, you've got Capcom, you've got Sega, and how is a country with these, megacorps in, video gaming, how are they lagging so far behind in esports? And that's what I was trying to find out when I started my research.
So from based what you have studied and what you just shared, what do you think are the biggest markets?
So in esports, the biggest markets right now is the United States and China. I'm not sure the numbers recently. I think in 2022, it was the US, but in the last 2 years, I'm not sure who is number one between the two. But it's definitely the United States and China. China has the largest number of esports players, that is contracted players for teams, where United States has the highest kind of market size in terms of sponsorship, advertisements, prize pools, and just the sheer number of tournaments. So those are the two biggest markets.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just have mentioned China, but I've heard, maybe I'm not correct, but it starts to have some restriction, it's surrounded video games. So it's how many hours you can play, and it seems it's also impacted the entire industry. And also in America, the hype actually is not as high than before. Do you have any insight regarding those markets, where things are leading, for both for example China, where was restriction, and also with America, where actually they hype everything, and once the hype is kind of over, if actually people are gonna still follow that trend?
Yeah. So we'll start with China here, and I think it also has to deal with that kind of COVID era system, and also the kind of booming growth of esports at the same time, just colliding, where people realized that they could make a career out of playing video games. They the prize pools in China are exceptionally high. If you look at any game, especially in the kind of mobile and MOBA areas of gaming, the prize pools are exceptionally high. And those young adults, those teens, they see that and they see that they can put effort into video gaming, and then that means that they don't have to go to, like university or anything like that. They can just earn money playing. They can be famous and earn money just by playing video games. And we saw that with, across the whole world where people were playing video games during the COVID-19 era. But specifically in China, we saw a very large growth in the number of active players, amateur and professional. And I believe that is kind of a kickback reaction from the government to kind of limit the number of people limit the number of hours that video games are being played, because they seen people were missing school, people were probably missing university, just in my opinion. I don't have a first-hand account in China, but in my opinion, I think that is one of the leading factors in that. People spending more time like net cafes and, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because a lot of esports players anywhere in the world will forego their education to pursue their esports, because we can talk about it later, but esports has a very strict kind of age limit. And it's not kind of this, like, as soon as you hit like 23 years old, you're getting kicked out, but it's just the amount of reaction time, and people want the younger, faster, younger generation of players that can play. But to go back to your second point, for the United States, and how it's kind of been decreasing in recent years, I think that problem is in two parts. And again, it kind of falls back to that kind of COVID-19 era. People are going outside more. People are, returning back into the normal life. So they don't play many video games or watch videos or online as much. And the second part is, it's a bit of a bigger paradigm shift, in my opinion, of the way that marketing is going to work on social media. Up until now, views have been king, impressions have been king. We've seen it, and now you've got X, and you've got impression farms, and you've got YouTube, where people are just doing like the 10-minute long videos, just trying to get the advertisement money with just how many views they can get. You've got Shorts, TikTok, just trying to make buzzwords and contents, just try and get those views up, because views were the biggest KPI. You could get your reach from that, and that reach is what sponsors generally like. But we've seen a shift, especially in esports, where these sponsors and brands have started asking, what is the value of a view, like critically. Of course, you can look at a YouTube view, you can look at a TikTok view, and you say, okay, this month I've had this many views, I got this much money. We divide the views by the money. This is a view, divide the money by the views, and this is dollar per view, right? And that's what generally people have used as the guiding value. But we're going to see a kind of, in my opinion, in the next couple of years, we're going to see a shift of, how brands are asking for KPIs. They're probably going to ask for more interactive activations. You see brands like Red Bull who don't work with people who don't like Red Bull. They won't force a activation on someone if they don't like the product. And we've seen that as well in kind of Japanese government aspect as well with, we're getting off on a tangent here, but there's been a recent stealth marketing law that came down in Japan, and a product cannot be placed in a video without being announced as PR. So if you are an influencer or social media, like a streamer or a YouTuber or something, and you receive a free laptop, right? You can't have that laptop be in the video without expressing that you received it for free. Now, the streamer won't get penalized, or the influencer won't get penalized. The company actually gets penalized. Of course, if they're not promoting it and it's just sitting there in the corner, then that's kind of a gray. Is it actually promotion or anything like that? But if they are actively like using the product on stream and they received it for free and they say something about it, but they don't say that they were sponsored, then that has legal implications for the yeah.
Gonna be penalized.
But yeah, so that's how the marketing world is changing, and that's how I'm seeing the esports market change as well, because some brands, they don't respect the values of those views, and so they're kind of pulling out as they kind of readjust their budgets and readjust how they're thinking about marketing and KPIs. Yeah.
It seems like the excitement of esports in America kind of fell off, which is like totally like the opposite of Japan. So could you tell me more regarding this trend?
So with the excitement or the hype of esports in the United States and Japan and the world in general, we have seen a decline in viewership, but again, that's also in line with the amount of users of online social media presence and stuff like that, with the decline from COVID numbers off of that. But in terms of hype, I think we're at an all-time peak, actually, in contrast to that, because in the United States and in other countries, we've seen the growth of the number of prize pools going out. We just had the Esports World Cup just close, and that is the kind of largest prize pools we've ever seen in any esports tournament. They had, to go into what the Esports World Cup was, it is a tournament in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, that was funded directly by the Saudi Arabian government. And withholding any opinions about that, it is the largest investment we've seen in esports to date. And it was a competition not only for individual games and the players themselves, it was a competition between teams. We've seen if your team won the Apex Legends tournament, if your team won the League of Legends tournament, then you received a number of points. If your team had many different teams, if your organization had many different teams competing in different games, then you had a higher chance of receiving those points for the Esports World Cup in general. And we would see the ranking of organizations across the world in esports. You've got the bigger ones like Team Falcons, which is also a Saudi Arabian-based organization. And then we've got the American organization, which I think everyone knows, TSM, was also participating. We have Cloud9. Some of the big names were participating in that Esports World Cup there. And that generated quite a bit of hype, mostly just because the prize numbers were very large. In terms of community, though, we've seen kind of a split, right? Because there was the implications of, supporting the Saudi Arabian government and where that money was coming from. It's a bit messy there. But then you also see the other side of it, where this is investing in esports, and it gives an opportunity for players and organizations to, get the investments or the prize pools that they've been, working so hard to get. We've seen, so in Japan, we've seen the kind of hype of esports kind of stagnate just a little bit. Of course, there's the community hype. If you're within the sphere of like fighting games, you're talking like Smash Brothers, Street Fighter, Tekken. Those tournaments are very exciting for the community, but they're not the best for organizations. There is really no big return from those tournaments, mostly because like Smash Brothers, you can't have official prize pools because it's not an official Nintendo tournament, and it gets messy when you try to host a tournament. But for like Street Fighter, you have the Street Fighter League, which is a limited invite-only system, and it does have prize pools, but it's very hard to get into. So the fighting game community is one of the best communities I've ever seen, but it's within the fighting game community. When you look at just esports hype in general, what organizations and what teams really want to see is non-esports fans cheering for them. And that's what we've seen in Japan, that's what we've seen with Valorant and those kind of FPS games. And I would even extend it to say mobile games as well. We'll start with Valorant and FPS and Apex Legends. We've seen the growth of Apex Legends with Japan being either the number 1 or number 2 market right now for Apex Legends compared to the US. I believe it's number 1 at the moment. We just had the announcement that the championship will be taking place in Sapporo in Hokkaido next winter, which will be the end of January for that, which is very exciting. I'm very excited to go see Apex Legends in Japan. It's been a long time coming. We've had community tournaments and smaller tournaments like Apex Matsuri and Dream Match, but we haven't had an official full-on Apex Legends playoff or championship, and this will be the first one. So it'll be very exciting to see that. But that's what I'm kind of talking about, the hype growth in Japan is because with Valorant, you have fans that don't even really play Valorant. They're there to watch, the Valorant players. It reminds me of the kind of old school League of Legends esports hype from there. Because with the old school League of Legends, you've gotten fans who were not deep fans of League of Legends, but they were fans of teams coming out to support those teams. And with Valorant and Apex, you have that as well, where you have fans of players or fans of organizations who aren't generally fans of the game, but just really want to support, their team and their players, come out and buy tickets and buy goods and really invest into, we call it oshi in Japanese, but yeah. And so they have their oshi team. They have the team that they really want to support. They go out and they buy all the goods. They buy the acrylic stands of the players and all these different kinds of goods. And it's really amazing to see that kind of hype growth in Japan. Of course, you see the players who have the biggest following. They're streamers, or if they're really interesting content creators. They have the biggest sales, of course. But yeah, it's definitely been growing quite a bit.
It's like a big community, actually. Yeah. It's also seems to become as popular as football. I'm gonna cheer up actually favorite players and so on. So it's quite exciting actually to see this happening.
If you ever have the chance, I do recommend to see an esports event live. It's very different than watching it on a Twitch stream or a YouTube stream. If you do have the chance. No.
Maybe. I have a friend, actually, she's a photographer, and she go all around those sports events. I nearly went to one actually in Sweden. Yes. But I would love to see that. It's quite like a very hypey type of atmosphere. Yes. People are so into it. You feel the passion actually from every individual in the room. So that's actually it's very interesting to see. I
just came back from a trip to Germany with the Apex Legends split to playoffs. I wasn't working with Kinotrope at the time. I was hired by another team to help with their logistics and management, and also translation from Japanese to English to help them get around the event. But just going to that Apex Legends tournament and being able to see it live, and of course, if you go to any esports event that has TSM participating in it, you will hear the TSM chants. And it's just TSM, TSM the whole time you're there, and it's an electric atmosphere, and it really changes your idea of what esports is and how the hype actually can be.
What are the top competitive games in Japan, and also like does it depend from like region to region in Japan? Like, could you tell more regarding this?
So, in terms of region to region, in Japan, we don't see much of a difference. It's more of a full country kind of marketing here. But the top games that we see are, Valorant, Apex Legends for the shooting games. For the fighting games, we have Street Fighter 6, which is one of the most popular Street Fighters we've seen, with the biggest and hypest tournaments we've seen lately, with the Street Fighter League and also EVO going on. But no, below that we have like Tekken and Smash Brothers as well in the fighting game category. In the mobile game category, we see games like PUBG Mobile. We see Identity 5. If you're not familiar with Identity 5, it's a kind of Dead by Daylight mobile version game, but it's got cute little characters, and it's very, very popular in East Asia, Southeast Asia. We've seen the tournaments from China with amazing prize pools. And the really, really interesting part that I never expected that I would see in esports is that these players are becoming idols.
Oh.
These mobile game players, these Identity 5 players, are seen more as idols than esports players. And it's very, very interesting. You go to an Identity 5 tournament in Japan, and you will see that the audience is 90% or more female.
That's interesting.
Unprecedented in the esports world. You have a fan event. You have Zeta. You have like Scars. If you have like I think there's a couple other ones, but yeah, if you go to like a Zeta or a Scars fan meeting for Identity 5, you will definitely see that 90% or more is female, and they are spending money. They will buy goods. They will buy anything that they can to cheer on their favorite player, and it is incredible.
What do you think is that? Is that because the players are so attractive, or it's just because it's Japan, so it's something to happen?
It's a bit of both. You do have good-looking players, but it's also the ease of access of the game. This will go into kind of a little bit of the history of esports as well. It's one of the minor reasons why esports wasn't growing in Japan, and that goes back into just the amount of space that people have in their home. And that's also why consoles got really popular in Japan. That's why consoles were kind of invented in Japan, is to have a home computer that you can play games on. And with the kind of growth of gaming PCs and the popularity of PC gaming growing in Japan, we've also seen the growth of esports coincide with that. But people also have powerful smartphones now. And the mobile gaming industry has also been growing in Japan. And this Identity 5 game has seen a lot of female players play it because it's also kind of cute, and it has really fun characters, and it's also a bit challenging as well.
Interesting.
And as far as, it's a really interesting phenomenon to see in generally a male-dominated esports fan world, to see a female-dominated fan event for a game that is participating in esports.
It's
It's very interesting.
very first time I hear about that. So
Yeah.
I would love to see that. So
Yeah.
maybe it's a good opportunity to actually see something like
Yeah, definitely. In Japanese, it's called Daigo Jinkaku. So if you just like, or do Identity 5, it's IDV for the 5. Just if you do some research about it, you can definitely see some of those events. And
Definitely we do.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Very interesting, yeah.
So can you tell me more regarding what kind of people go into esports?
So it's very interesting, and it does change from country to country. But in general, we see a lot of young adults, teenagers who play esports or want to get into esports. Generally, in Japan, we see anywhere from the ages of 15 to 16-year-old high school students who really want to, grow their esports career, and they're really passionate about it, or they just have the sense. We say sense in Japan, but the skill, and they really put the time and effort into their practice, into the amateur tournaments, and we've seen their growth over the years, and then they get scouted. And usually in recent months, I would say, we've seen major esports teams develop an academy system where these young adults, these teenagers, can participate in an official esports organization as academy students, where they train with an official organization coach, but they're not, fully contracted because they're still underneath the legal age, right? So it's kind of like a club system that you would have. If you compare it to, the U.S., then you have, high school students who have after-school clubs, intramural activities. It's similar to that, where these students will have their high school clubs and they have an esports club, which can also be participating with official organizations as well. In recent years, in recent video game updates, we've seen the support of amateur tournaments, especially from Riot Games and like Valorant and League of Legends. They have the tournament system within the game itself. So for Valorant, you have the Premier Leagues, and for League of Legends, you have Clash. For the Valorant Premier Leagues, as long as you are playing the game, you can gather 5 people, you can participate in a tournament. It doesn't matter what rank you are. And they will put you into your respective tournament bracket. If you're one of the top teams in that amateur tournament, like if you have the highest rank, you win that tournament, then you actually have a chance to get promoted into the official league. For Valorant, there is 3 tiers in Japan. You have the Premier League, which is the amateur version. You have the Challenger League, which is where you see most of the Japanese organization, the domestic tournaments. And then above that, you have the International League, where if you are the top team in Japan, then you go into this middle ascension tournament, is what it's called, where you number 1 in Japan, then you have to be number 1 in the Pacific region, Asia Pacific region. And you're competing with Korea, you're competing with Indonesia, you're competing with Vietnam. All those countries all send 1 team into this tournament. And then the top APAC team is then promoted into the International League. It's a very, very competitive system. Very fun to watch, but working in it is very stressful, I'll be honest. Yeah.
It sounds like actually a very stressful process to go through.
Yeah. But let's go back. So these young adults, these teens in Japan, they play these games, they participate, they create their own teams, they have their own passion. They're 16, 17 years old, they hit 18, they sign with an organization, and they start their career. And with that career start, they actually a lot of esports teams pay a monthly salary to players. You'll be earning a living playing games, practicing, doing scrims, not just off of tournament money alone, but actually from a salary that you earn every month. And of course, it depends on the organization. Some organizations run it as a kind of freelance contract. Some organizations run it as a part-time contract. What we do at Kinotrope is actually we hire our players as employees. So they get the full benefits of an employee, a full-time employee with the company. You get health insurance and that as well, while also being a player. So that's one of the aspects of Kinotrope that is very interesting.
In Japan, like what kind of, how much like monthly salary could you expect as a player?
It depends. You're looking at the popularity of the game, the popularity of the person, the age of the person, and their skill. Those four factors are the biggest ways to determine a salary of a player. You're looking at a range of anywhere from 50,000 Japanese yen to, 300,000 to 400,000. It's a massive range. If you are a 17-year-old for a very small, esport, maybe a mobile game, you have maybe 2-digit followers, then you're looking at kind of a low-end salary for that. But as you grow, if you are more into the 10K followers on social media, you constantly stream, you have your own branding, you bring a lot of value into the team, then you're looking at more higher salaries for that.
Interesting, Charlie. Actually, some young individuals go to esports quite at a very early age. What happened when once actually they're done with the esports career? What's next, especially if they didn't go to school much or even university?
Yeah, that's a very good question because it's one of the biggest issues in esports and in the world, actually. What does an esports player do after they retire? There's the obvious answers. Either if they were successful in their game, like if they were one of the top players, and they managed to also build their brand, they would stream, they would build content, then they transition into a content creator or influencer. Or if they have enough game skill, they could also loop back into the system itself and become a coach, an analyst to help, or even like a manager for the organizations themselves, becoming staff within the organizations. And that's where Kinotrope is also focusing. We want to make sure our players are prepared for their second career, is what we call it. Because a lot of these young adults, they go into esports, they forego their education. Some of them just don't even, go to university, and they missed a couple years of starting at a company that you would normally have. And in my opinion, that causes kind of a lack of, how would you say, work ethic. Of course, there are extremes. There are players who are dedicated, they put in the work for esports, they also educate themselves, and they are very, socially adept. They, are skilled in, communication, human-to-human communication and working with other people, teamwork and collaboration and stuff like that. But then you also have on the other side the extreme where you have players who don't have that kind of social adeptness. They're not the best at working in teams outside of their known realm, and it's hard for them to learn and grow in a society after they finish their esports. And so we're kind of working between those two extremes to make sure that esports players have somewhere to go after they graduate. And I mentioned before, Kinotrope is a web development company first. And then within Kinotrope itself, we have our Kinotrope gaming division. And so what we like to do is we like to provide a system for our players, if they wanted to to work at Kinotrope. We don't have a requirement for education. We don't have a requirement for base level knowledge. We do all of our training, on the job. We want to make sure that our employees are all at the same level. So if a player wanted to learn web development, they can learn coding. They can do so in an easy to transition to environment. And we hope that creating this kind of player-first philosophy, we can give them a second career and a chance to grow their career after esports.
It's very nice to see you have like several paths that actually available to you.
Yes.
From actually your company.
Yeah, it's one of the major problems, and it's one of the solutions that we hope we can provide to that problem. Yes.
If someone wanted to become a competitive player, what do you need to do?
So if you're a young adult and you're very interested and you have the skill, you're high ranked in the video game of your choice, you need to promote yourself. There are multiple ways to promote yourself. You can either take your content online to streaming or YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, your choice of media platform, multiple if possible, just to get your brand off the ground. You need to solidify your brand image. You need to understand who you are, what kind of content you can make. If you are fully skilled, maybe make some guides just to first get that step off the ground of differentiating yourself from the crowd. And if you are in a able area, participate in amateur tournaments. We mentioned before with Valorant and League of Legends having easy access to those amateur tournaments online. You can participate just by getting 5 friends together and playing when you can. That is by far the easiest way to get into esports. But if you're looking at an esport that doesn't support those kind of amateur tournaments officially, look into your community tournaments. Excuse me. You want to make sure that you have anywhere in the world there will be local tournaments. Even if it's online, participate in as much as you can, just to kind of raise your skill, raise your knowledge. And one of the biggest things I see that improves players is looking back at your own videos. So if you want to get better, you have to know where you made mistakes. And you have to know where to improve yourself. Of course, you can pay for a coach to do it. There's a lot of coaching services out there right now where you can work with an official esports coach and you send them your video of you playing your game. That is all very good. It's always good to get a third-person perspective of, your performance, but it's also very important to look at it from yourself. Get that introspection going and really understand how you play and where you need to go. And I think if you can get those points down, you can definitely become an esports player.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
What does it take to run an esports team?
So it takes a lot. It definitely does. And when you're a small esports team like us, you've got a few people wearing many hats. You've got, I'm currently the general manager of Kinotrope Gaming, and the term general is very open because I'm managing, the teams themselves. I'm managing, making sure our social media schedules are good. I'm also managing our, marketing and sales to make sure that we are, hitting our budget goals every, quarter and getting those reports. And I also have to report internally. So a lot of people look at esports and they just see esports players. Like, if you want to get involved in esports, you have to be an esports player, and that is completely wrong. If you want to get involved in esports, but maybe you don't have the skill to become a player, there are so many different avenues for you to get involved, whether that's video editing, whatever, it's web editing. An esports team needs, a website, or they need a social media manager. They need video editors. They need, I think I said video editors twice, but They need marketing managers. They need, people all around the ecosystem. An esports team is a company. If you just boil it down, it needs every aspect of what a regular company would need. It needs a finance manager. It needs a tax person. It needs, if you want to help esports players, because there's a lot of international travel. If an esports team is traveling a lot, they need visas. They need logistics management. There's all these different aspects that people don't really see because it's all behind the scenes. So it's very important to kind of appreciate the effort it takes to run an esports team, because there's a lot of movement behind the scenes that goes on. And if you want to get involved in esports and you don't have maybe the skill to be a player, look into other areas where you can improve, focus on that improvement, and see how you can become helpful towards the esports organization. It doesn't have to be an esports organization as well either. It can be a tournament organizer. It can be a community management organizer. It can be a community tournament organizer, where you get together with your friends and you build a small tournament for this one game that you guys really like to play, and people will come and people will play it. And that's really how it all starts with esports, is just building that community and just seeing everyone has their own role. And if you can fill in one of those roles, then you can be involved in esports too.
How's the team been performing?
So as far as Kinotrope Gaming is going, we have currently a number of divisions. We have Rainbow Six Siege, we have PUBG Mobile, we have an Apex Legends team. We will be announcing a Rocket League team soon. And yeah, we've been performing pretty well. We're in Rainbow Six Siege, we are currently number 2 in the league. In PUBG Mobile, we're number 1 in the league. Apex Legends, we've gotten into the top 30 in the World Championship in Split 1. But we're trying to figure out how we can get into championships for going forward from there. But yeah, we have some pretty well performing teams. And yeah, we're looking to continue that growth and performance into the future. Yeah.
How people can find more information regarding Kinotrope?
Of course. We're on the usual social media channels. Kinotrope itself is a web design company, but Kinotrope Gaming is the esports division within that company. I'm the leader. You can find me on X, LinkedIn, all that. Just bbot William is my name there. But if you want to look into Kinotrope there, we've got the X on Kinotrope Gaming. We have a YouTube account, Kinotrope Gaming as well. We have all of our players' YouTube accounts as well, so feel free to check it out if you're interested in learning more there.
Anything else to mention? Anything you would like to promote at the time being?
Well, I would like to say again, thank you again for having me out here. It's been a real pleasure to talk about esports, especially in English in Japan. It's been real fun. So yeah, if you keep an eye out for Kinotrope Gaming, we have our Rainbow Six Siege team currently participating in the Japan League. Keep an eye out on our score. Give out the hashtag KNWin if you are cheering us on. And the PUBG Mobile team is also going to be looking to participate in the International Championship as well. So keep an eye out for the Kinotrope Gaming there as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, William, for coming. Actually, I learned quite a lot. That was such an honor discussing more about esports with you.
The pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much for having me out here, and I'm glad to share my information with anyone I can.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.